No? Okay. So, again, one liturgy over 3 days. There won't be Holy Thursday is also extremely beautiful. Other than those who volunteer for the foot washing, OCA has no real part in the Holy Thursday liturgy. But it's something you don't want to miss. I mean, these things happen only once a year. And the church pulls out all the stops. I mean, it couldn't be more beautiful. There's, at the end of Mass, there's no dismissal because it's one liturgy over 3 days that ends with the Easter Vigil. There's a grand, the Mass is ended, go in peace, hallelujah, hallelujah, at the end of the Vigil. That's where the dismissal is. So Holy Thursday, there's no dismissal, but there's a procession with the Blessed Sacrament over to an altar of repose, as it's called. In our case, that's the shrine. And there's adoration up until midnight. It's spending an hour, if you can, or whatever, 5 minutes, or whatever you could spend with the Lord. The church will be stripped bare. You'll walk into the church on Good Friday and say, are they moving? Is something wrong? Is something happening? Because the tabernacle will be empty. Everything will be empty. Statue will be covered. You think it's like we're going to be painting or something because the statues are covered with cloth. It's this stark, dramatic feeling of emptiness because Jesus is in the tomb. Jesus dies on Friday and he's in the tomb till Saturday night, early Easter morning. And so the service on Good Friday, the service of the Passion of our Lord, is at 3 o'clock. And again, another beautiful, touching, moving service. The prayer that we used for our opening prayer last week, the reproaches of Good Friday, which is even longer, the full thing, you'll hear, my people, what have I done to you? How have I offended you? Answer me. I've done so much, and look what you did to me. So it's a very, very, very moving. And then the youth have their shadow stations after that, right? I mean, Cooper, Tyler, you're participating in that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah, you having a bad day? No. Okay. Okay.
Is he playing the part of the shadow?
Maybe. I don't know what parts are you playing.
Yeah.
What are you there?
I'm one of the kids.
You're one of the kids.
The kids and woman.
What station is it?
I think it's like the
8th station.
8th station.
And Cooper's playing Jesus.
Except.
Ooh.
Cause I know I have.
Good casting.
Because I have to know my.
Yeah, he's got the hair.
The hair.
He's got hair. Can you grow a beard by then?
I need to. I keep needing to cut mine.
Cut a little of yours, glue it on.
Glue it on, yeah. Here, I have the alien tape here. That'll hold it. That'll hold it on.
Velcro, when Jack was little, he played, for Halloween, he was Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
That was one of his favorite characters. So I took tincture of benzoin, which does not come off, and Velcro it on, and had a beard, and he had that beard. I mean, I could get the beard off, but the Velcro stayed. His daddy wasn't too happy. But,
Did you have a stovepipe hat?
Oh yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah.
I was Uncle Sam one year, Abraham Lincoln one year.
Oh.
I don't know what else was during that era when you sewed them.
Yeah.
Today, most of the kids are just either monsters or ghouls of some sort.
He was always
Not a blood.
Lincoln in 5th grade.
I was a Borg from Star Trek. That was the closest that I could come to that. So.
You were a pirate, or no, Camelot. You were a knight.
Oh, okay. And let's see about the Triduum, Carol. What else am I forgetting? And so then Good Friday is then, we do have, some of you have been coming to the Friday Stations of the Cross. That's always a beautiful thing to do. That week that I am away, that 5th Sunday of Easter, Christy is going to do Stations of the Cross with you. And kind of that sort of thing. Talk about the stations and actually pray the stations, because it's not enough to talk about the stations. It's good to pray the stations. And how she does that, I'll leave that up to her. We have 3 sets of stations here at the parish. We have the ones in the shrine that we use for our Friday stations, but we also have Stations of the Cross in the church. Very modern, very, you could not tell what the station is by looking at the station, you know. You have to go up and read the number. Oh, this is number 4. Oh, okay. And then we also have do we still have the outdoor stations? I know we have the,
Yes,
Oh, yeah, you do.
the 14 of them, or just the Tamaqua?
there's 12.
There's 12.
It's 12, the 12 Tamaqua stations.
Right.
I think there's 14 though, in
Yes.
that Emeritus Wall.
Okay, so that means we have 4 sets of stations.
We do.
We have 4. Wow.
We've never done the Tamaqua ones before.
We have. Well, I actually did it once with Zachary when they were first put in.
It's especially interesting, those stations there, because they're spaced the same number
Yeah, we've done it
of
twice
feet
now.
as it goes along.
Yeah.
For example, the difference between the 6th and the 7th station is the longest.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really picture what
The steps.
Christ walked and how he walked
Right,
the
the number of
distance.
steps.
I had no idea, you know,
Yeah.
now I know.
Yeah.
And that was,
Twice.
it's only 12, right? For whatever reason, the Tamaqua Indians didn't do 14. The Franciscan missionaries, the Franciscans were the ones who invented the Stations of the Cross, right? St. Francis went to the Holy Land, and he actually went there to convert the Sultan. I guess it didn't work, based on what's going on today with Iran. But he was so moved by both the Bethlehem, to see where Christ was born, and then in Jerusalem when he walked the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow, the way of the cross. And most people then, going from Europe to the Holy Land was a major expedition. You just didn't take a plane or train over there, So he said, I had a good idea. And he brought both the manger scene, the creche. He said, people can't go to Bethlehem and see what's there. We'll bring Bethlehem to wherever they are. And he had the idea of the manger scene that we all now know and love. And everywhere you look at Christmas, there are manger scenes, right? And he did the same thing with the stations. He said that people can't go there and do what I did and walk those stations. So I'll bring those 14 stations that you'll see if you don't know the 14 of them, you'll see when Christy does them, so that people can experience that here, sort of. And I guess the Tamaqua Indians got very clever, and somebody, I guess, counted steps in Jerusalem from, how many steps was it, from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3 to 3 to 4, and they have the same number of steps here. So you would take the same number of steps that Jesus would have taken. And I don't know how accurate it is, but I think it's a neat idea.
Now, since Zachary did it, I'm going to say it's accurate.
I think so.
Good old Zachary.
Zachary used to be our shrine director. I mean, a top-notch scholar of all these. His major is what? He's a PhD student in
Early European.
early European history, but he is a number one scholarly guy. I'm intimidated by how bright he is and how much he's able to do. I guess being young helps, because I can't do the things that I did when I was in my 20s anymore at all. But so that'll be beautiful. Then the week after Easter Vigil, even though you all will have received the sacraments, we're not done yet. After Easter, we enter into the period of what's called mystagogy. Greek for entering into the mystery. In the early church, what we do here in OCIA is kind of a reinstitution of what happened in the early church, except 2 big instances. The early church had 3 years of not 1 but 3 years of OCIA. Why? Well, because our readings follow a 3-year cycle, and they wanted you to hear all the readings before you made that decision to enter the church or not. And secondly, you didn't talk about sacraments, like we talked about baptism, Eucharist, holy orders, all this stuff. You didn't talk about the sacraments until after the Easter Vigil, after you became Catholic, so to speak. And that's not because of any, onerous reason or, persecution. It's because they thought you wouldn't be capable of understanding the sacraments, or not that any of us really understand them, right? But you wouldn't be capable of understanding the sacraments and their significance without first having received the grace of baptism yourself. That supernatural change that happens in you, that ontological change, you're a changed person with your baptism. For all eternity, your soul is marked as a follower of Jesus Christ, and God's grace is poured into you at that baptizing, right? And so they felt you needed that grace before they could talk about reconciliation or Eucharist or marriage or any of that stuff. So now, of course, we talk about all that beforehand, but what happens is kind of modeled on the early church. There was a time, certainly this RCIA, now it's OCIA, it kind of came back after the Second Vatican Council, which ended in 1965. It took a couple of years, but that's when they said, we should go back to doing this the way we used to do it in the beginning. Before then, I have known many people, many of them have passed away, that when they converted, like in the 1950s or something, in the early 60s, when they became Catholic, they said, you would go meet with the pastor for maybe one meeting or maybe 3 meetings, and he would pretty much, just one guy was very funny, he was a general in the Air Force. He said, we'd had to go meet with him about 3 times. Every time he repeated the same thing, and then after 3 times he said, okay, and boom, you're Catholic, so it's kind of nice now. You kind of know what you're getting into. I mean, it's a marriage, right? It's your God. Summarize the Bible in 5 words.
God wants to marry.
God wants to marry you. You're getting married. I mean, if you went to a bar and met a woman, or I guess for me, if I met a woman at a bar and that first night I went and married her, what are the chances of that marriage lasting? Not very good, right? You want to know somebody before you marry them. You want to get to know them, and they need to get to know you, and that's what this is. You want to know your bridegroom, in this case Jesus, the divine bridegroom. You want to know he is proposing to you. He's saying, will you marry me? I should give that symposium paper for them to read if they want, or maybe I could even give it here. All through the Old Testament, right? Isaiah, Hosea, Jeremiah. I will be your husband, and you have been this unfaithful bride to me. And Christ is the divine bridegroom. In so many ways in the Gospels, he identifies himself. In the wedding at Cana, right? It is the job of the groom to provide the wine. What happened at the wedding at Cana? The groom fell on his face and the wine ran out. And who provided the wine? Jesus, the divine bridegroom, right? When the Pharisees and the disciples of John the Baptist came to Jesus and said, how come we fast and your disciples don't? He said they can't, because the bridegroom is with them. Talking about an ancient Jewish wedding. An ancient Jewish wedding was in 2 parts. Jack, you probably know this well, right?
Well, I mean, again, they're Reformed Jews. So.
Okay, so they're like a lot of Catholics. They're what does that mean? I don't know. We just do that.
Our uncle is still extremely active at their synagogue. So
where does he live?
In California. But he comes down every now and again. He's an old Marine infantry officer.
Oh, that must be fun.
We're not talking about his military stuff. I was asking him some questions because I was at OCIA, the last time he was back. So I was picking his brain. But I mean, they're kind of like, I would say it's even more like Episcopalian, that they love God very much, but they're also not.
But let him keep his distance, right?
They're not incredibly strict about anything that they do.
The Fiddler on the Roof, right? Is there a proper blessing for the Tsar? Yes. Yeah. May God bless the Tsar and keep him far away from us. I kind of feel that way, I think, about God. I've had friends whose father was an Orthodox rabbi, and I said, so do you keep kosher? And you go, no, I eat bacon and shrimp and whatever I want.
Well, the best BLT I ever had was at a Jewish deli that they took us to one time. So, in Palm Coast.
You know the joke, Noah's son walks into a Jewish deli and they look at him and say, "Sorry, sir, we don't serve ham here." Noah's son was named Ham, right? Okay, so here we go. What was I talking? What was I saying? The Jewish wedding was in two parts. The first was a betrothal, but betrothal was a legal binding marriage. To break up after a betrothal would require a divorce, a get. The Jews, they call it a get, right? You have to divorce your wife. In Jewish law, the man gets to divorce his wife. The wife can't divorce her husband. But in Roman law, a wife could divorce her husband. Roman law went both ways. But anyway, the first part of the Jewish wedding is the betrothal. You got to come to the Seder meal we hold, because I'm going to give that same talk again that I gave last year, and it really explains this in detail. So at the betrothal, the groom says to the bride-to-be, he gives her a glass of wine and says to her, "This wine represents a new covenant in my blood," or a new covenant in blood. If she sips of the cup, she accepts the proposal. At that point, they are betrothed. And betrothed means legally married. You would have to get a divorce to split up at that point. That's why it's important to know that, because in the gospel it says when Mary and Joseph were betrothed to each other, but before they were living together, right? And then Mary is found to be with child, and Joseph, being a righteous man, wants to quietly divorce her instead of putting her to shame. Why would he need to divorce somebody if he wasn't married to that somebody? So you see, that's why it really aggravates me to no end today when you hear Mary was an unwed mother, you know. Mary and Joseph were married when Jesus was conceived, because in the first century, certainly, and before, Jewish marriage was the betrothal. And then what would happen is the bridegroom would go off for up to a year to prepare the place for them to live. So he'd go build a house that would be their marital home. And then he would come back to get his bride, and that's when the wedding celebration would begin. Typically it was a week-long celebration of family, friends. While that celebration was going on, nobody was required to observe the traditional Jewish practices of fasting and prayer. Don't open that up yet. Let that sit for a minute. And so that's why Jesus said, when the bridegroom is present, they don't fast. But when the bridegroom gets taken away, then they will fast. So Jesus sees his time of public ministry with his disciples as the wedding celebration. And so the disciples were not required to fast because of that time. And then at the end, and you know, notice where Jesus says in the gospel, "In my Father's house there are many places. If not, I would not have told you. That I go to prepare a place for you." Right? We are the bride, he is the bridegroom. He is betrothed to us, and he goes to prepare a place for us, and then he comes back to get us. And at the end of that 7-day celebration is the second part of the Jewish wedding, where the husband and wife are led in procession to the bridal chamber, the chuppah in Hebrew, where they consummate the marriage. The marriage is consummated at that point. And it is the job of somebody's job to, after the marriage has been consummated, after the man and woman have engaged in a marital embrace, what happens then? The bridegroom emerges from the chuppah with the words, "It is finished. It is consummated." What does Jesus say on the cross? It is finished. It is consummated. So there is the wedding chamber. Right there is the wedding chamber. We are to join him in the wedding chamber. That's what we are called to do if we accept that proposal. You see, that's why you need a year-long OCIA. I mean, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into here. Right? You said, yes, I'm going to crawl into that bed with my bridegroom, and I'm going to consummate the marriage with him through my suffering. There's so much here. So, what am I forgetting? I mean, somebody here might be able to point out something I'm forgetting. There's so much. You know that, again, you hear this all the time, that Mary, Jesus, and Joseph were illegal aliens, right? Because of the flight into Egypt. Herod wanted to kill the Christ child, so Egypt was part of the Roman Empire. They weren't illegal anything. It would be like going from Florida to Georgia. You're allowed to do that.
I forgot to have class. I'm going to be late. They have class. It's the first.
I would like to.
Do you want some paper to write a note to the teacher?
I'll tell them.
Oh.
I'll send an email. No, I'll walk them over there.
Anyway, we haven't gotten to what we're supposed to be doing today, which is questions. I mean, although Bob will answer, Christy's not here, Bob could answer. No. Well, questions. Even about what happened yesterday.
One at a time.
It was very beautiful.
It was, yes it
I'm so
was.
glad that
We're able to make it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a burden, I know, to drive 2 hours to go to St. Augustine and then look 2 hours for parking. Wayne and Margaret Olsky, they had a real ordeal finding parking because they went to one or two of the parking lots and they were full. I don't know what was going on, you know, and they said, we walked and we walked and we walked and we walked. But that's St. Augustine. Did you hear what happened to me with the parking? Did I tell you what happened to me with the, you know, there's that one handicap spot. I have this leg length discrepancy in the pacemaker, so I have a handicap placard. There's that one handicap parking spot at the front door of the cathedral. And we were running late. There was a lot of traffic, and we were getting nervous because when we had pulled into the city there, already the doors to the cathedral were open. And I said, okay, should I drop Bob and Christy off and go find? And they said, no, we'll stick with you. I said to Christy, look and see. I'm sure it's not because the city was jam-packed with people if that handicap spot is open there. And she said, I can't really tell, but it looks like it might be. I said, well, let me gamble, you know. And I made the U-turn to pull right in front of the cathedral. It's open. It's available. So I just pull in. The most difficult thing was we almost ran down a priest who was standing in the street. But
He shouldn't have been in the street.
He shouldn't have been in the street, you know. That was Father Lindenfelser, the not the judicial vicar, but the canonical chancellor.
Do you like it?
Once you start to get up into the levels of administration, you know, you gotta be careful.
Although I wasn't there yesterday, I've gone many times in the past, and I'm always moved by seeing people from other parishes too. They're doing the same exact thing. And it's very encouraging, very beautiful.
A lot of young kids.
Yeah.
A lot of young kids.
Well, we had, you know, St. Augustine's, that's going to be the Catholic Gators, the students, you saw all of them, and even Holy Faith has a lot of young people, because there are two kinds of Catholic students. There are the kind that, there's kind that don't go to church at all, but there's the kind that like the student-centered environment, you know, of a robust campus church and that sort of thing. And there are those who want something that reminds them more of their parish family at home and so forth. So they tend to go to Holy Faith because that's more of your, you know, suburban kind of parish. So they have a lot of young people.
Like college-age students.
Yeah.
You know, that are joining. I've read that that's all over the country.
Yes.
Wonderful.
That the colleges.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I don't know if that's what some people call the Charlie Kirk effect or exactly what it is,
I
but
think a lot of it has to do with that football player, that quarterback that was family very devout.
Okay.
And he's gotten a lot of people, you know, to go in. But like Indiana, right after they won or whatever.
Okay.
Like 200 students that came and said, we want to, you know, join the church.
I guess there's a couple of effects going on right now. It's kind of confluence of multiple events that's causing this. Pray though that they stick with it.
Right.
One of the sad things is sometimes after people get what they want, they kind of disappear, so pray that they don't do that. Pray that they stick with it. That's why Melody is going to come in. She's trying to recruit for Angels of Mercy, but I'll try to see if after Easter we can get some representatives of parish ministries to come in and talk to you about what they do. We'll have several of you here want to be altar servers, and we have some young ones. Well, certainly Sarah and Cooper, who just left, they want to do it. So we're going to have an altar server training. We want to wait till closer to the Easter Vigil because there are certain people in this parish that will get upset if they start serving before they're baptized. They're going to say, "You can't do that." No, I don't want to. You have to deal with that. So I would have no problem with it, but I could see it happening now. But we'll get them trained so they could hit the ground running as soon as Easter is over.
We could use more readers.
We could use more readers. You notice a lot of the same people read all the time. So if anybody would like to read,
I might.
okay. The person who trains readers.
I think I do.
Right there. And I don't know if you'd like to, or Taylor, if you'd like to do it, or.
I know my wife is.
She's on the list. I have her number. We want to put together. We like to train if we can get 5 people or so to do it in one fell swoop, other than having to do the same thing 5 times. Communion ministers. Once you're fully initiated, ministers of Holy Communion. Right. That's a real honor. A lot of people are nervous about that, and that's a good thing because you're handling the most precious thing we have. You're handling the Eucharist, especially with the precious blood. People just, and so many people who receive tend to be a little cavalier, they chuck it back at you. No, please don't do that.
Or they grab it from you, right?
Or they grab it from you, yeah, okay. But we need more communion ministers. I know that if you like the behind-the-scenes stuff, they need help with a lot of the hospitality stuff. You set up and clean up. Everybody is good at sitting down to eat, but then somebody has to set it up, and then somebody has to clean it up. So they're always looking for help with that.
And help in the kitchen too, with cooking. They could use help.
Yeah.
A few months ago, the bishop reminded us to be quiet before Mass.
Yeah.
And I think he was pretty successful. There's been a big improvement on the quiet before Mass. But I hear coming up, he's going to address being properly dressed.
Yeah. But that was I would have thought he would have done that already. I wonder if he's getting a lot of pushback.
Well, yeah, I would. It's been so long. I mean, if you had the Sisters of St. Joseph like me, you'd have no problem. I'm terrified that they're going to be at the gates of heaven saying, "You didn't listen to a word we said."
Yeah, there are so many people that it's good that they're here, but I would never dream of coming to a Sunday Mass in shorts and a t-shirt. It's just not. Maybe because I'm old now, but. And as I say, it's important that you're here, but it's you couldn't, the analogy I like to make is I don't care what your political views are. There's a protocol for the White House. I don't care who the president is. You cannot see the president if you show up with shorts and flip-flops if you had a meeting or a t-shirt. You're not allowed. They won't let you in. They'll turn you away. Right? And yet you're coming to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and so many people are just so casual. I love that one. I forgot the Protestant minister who about communion said, "If I believed what you Catholics claim to believe about the Eucharist, I wouldn't walk down that aisle. I would crawl on my hands and knees down that aisle." We need to, and of course, I'm not telling you, the people in this room, you're the good ones, right? You're the ones who don't need to hear this, but you're the ones who maybe could spread that message to the people you encounter, right? That
don't wear pajamas to church.
Don't wear pajamas to church.
The big thing about people wearing pajamas everywhere, it amazes me.
It is.
I see them in stores and everybody go, what? You couldn't find it. I know the airlines are starting to get stuff about that because I think it's just, there's a protocol, there's a,
You go to Publix, Walmart, you see people in bedroom slippers.
I can wear my pajamas all day, but then I leave my house.
Exactly,
Have you seen the
exactly.
website, people of Walmart?
Yes,
Yes.
Good.
You can see everything at Walmart, just about
you
anything.
can. Yeah, Walmart is a
Around the
unique.
what?
And the airlines are like the bus station now, too.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's terrible. Just,
It really amazes me how much we've gotten away from dressing.
Yeah.
We used to never go to the doctor without putting on
Right, I
our
was just-
clothes.
That's right.
exactly,
There was just things that you didn't do, and now you go and
yeah.
they look like they came out of the bedroom or came out of the closet.
I just had an eye operation, and the people in the operating room were surprised that I was dressed up.
I wouldn't doubt it.
You didn't have to all dress up for an operation. Well, if I die, I want to look good.
Oh, the Undertaker will take care of that for you.
He'll clean me up.
Yeah, I mean, if you really stop and think about what you're doing when you attend the Sunday liturgy, I mean, you wonder what goes on in people's heads. Do they really understand what they're doing? Now, I understand there are times when you're going to go to Mass and then you're going to go on to the family picnic or something. There are exceptions. Daily Masses are exceptions, right?
Do you want some water?
I have one right here.
You got it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Careful, watch those fall. Thank you.
Barbara, I appreciate it.
I didn't bring some in and I forgot it.
Yeah. This is not a question, but did we ever do the prophecy, the Daniel?
No, we didn't.
And that's very interesting, and you need to spend some time to do it.
Yeah, I could probably find it on my laptop or over my tablet real fast, but we can talk about that.
I do have a question.
When I was a kid, I used to love chili flavored, not so much anymore.
Jesus is a sacrifice to God Mass, and we join ourselves to that sacrifice of Jesus to God, the Father. Why do they bring the basket of money up there? Because that's not really part of the offering. That's to help support the church.
It's symbolic of the offering. It's of the ancient church would bring all sorts of stuff. They would bring goats and chickens and cabbages to help the ministers of those early church to survive. A lot of times they were just traveling preachers, or they kind of was their job, just like it is today. Today, if you want to support somebody, you don't bring them a cabbage and a goat. You give them a check. So it's symbolic of your offering of.
Symbolic of the Old Testament type of sacrifice, where the animal was brought to the temple and sacrificed and eaten.
That is a type of foreshadowing of our sacrifice of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are the three biggies that Jesus did during Lent, right? That's what Jesus said you do. He did that when you fast and when you pray and when you give alms, because giving alms is, if anything, symbolic of mercy and charity. A lot of the church fathers would talk about, they wouldn't say prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. They would say prayer, fasting, and mercy, because mercy is really mercy if somebody is in need and you're providing something of your means to help them in their need and so forth. So it's an act of love, and that's what that offering is for the basket of money, so to speak. Is from a very superficial point of view, it's our financial support of the parish, but it's stuff
separate from the actual offering to God.
Is it, you're saying I'm taking of my means, of what I have, and I'm sacrificing it to be used for whatever purposes the church deems fit, helping the community outreach or helping religious education, or so in our current economy or our current way we do things, your money is how you support things. You know, you give to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, or you give to this, you know, that sort of thing. Money is the means by which you support the actions that, and so that's symbolic of you offering, of taking from your needs, from yourself. I could have used that money to buy something for myself, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that money and use it to help the poor. And that's kind of coupled with the fasting. You know, okay, I would have gone out to a fancy dinner, but I'm not. It's not just not having the fancy dinner, it's maybe taking the money you would have spent on that fancy dinner and using it to, again, provide an act of charity, an act of love where it's needed.
Makes sense.
I remember when one of the priests, when we got married, we had 5 priests at our wedding. One of them was from Nigeria. And I remember driving with him in the car before the wedding. He goes, in my country, the man gives goats. His accent, how did his accent go? He was saying like the man gives guts to the father, you know, of the bride. I'm thinking, do you do that here? And I'm thinking, what's he talking about? And I got him to repeat it a few times, and he said, we give goats to the... No, we don't give goats. I didn't give your father a goat. But in some countries, you see, it's still a custom where, you know, they'll bring up the sack of potatoes and chickens and goats and say, here you go, you know.
You could have said to her father, I am a goat. I'm the greatest of all time. That's who your daughter's given. That may not have worked.
She may have married me anyway, I don't know. But, you know, the words at that, you know, when the priest says, may the Lord accept the sacrifice at your, or the Lord accept may my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God the Father Almighty. So it's not just that bread and wine sacrifice, but our sacrifice, which first and foremost includes ourselves. It's again our willingness to say we're willing to fall into the marriage bed of the cross and offer ourselves in sacrifice. Maybe not exactly in that way, but in the many ways, the trials and sufferings that do come our way. There's something else when you said something I was going to... What did you say before that?
The prophecy of Daniel.
Oh, yeah, we won't have time to do... Yeah, we'll do that, though, because that's... you know, you often hear... Nobody ever explains it. Or maybe it's because everybody knows it, you know, but you often hear that during the time of Jesus, there was great expectation that now was the time for the Messiah to come. There are even a lot of false messiahs. There are a lot of people, just like today, capitalized on it and say, hey, yo, I'm him, you know, and that sort of thing. They didn't usually get too far. But the reason you had that time of great expectation was because the prophet Daniel prophesied in the book of Daniel to, not the prophet, in the book of the prophet Daniel, the angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel and gave him a timeline to the day, of when the sins of Israel would be forgiven and the, I don't know if nation is the right word, I could find it, would be restored. And he kind of does it in a cryptic little bit of a way, talks about weeks of years and things like that. But if you take the timeline that the angel Gabriel gave to Daniel and kind of do the math, it places you in the year 33 AD as the year when Israel will be redeemed and her sins forgiven. And there's 2 times in all the Bible, in all Scripture, where the angel Gabriel makes an appearance, right? The first time is when he appears to Daniel and tells him this timeline. And then when he appears to the Virgin Mary and says, now, it's time.
Is he the only angel that became a messenger like?
Angel means messenger in Hebrew.
Okay.
Malach is messenger in Hebrew.
So they're all gossips.
I have a question, and this drove me crazy right before we were about to leave. What is the appropriate form of address for the bishop? So if I go up to shake his hand, instead of saying father, or what I landed on with Wikipedia, because that's all I had time to look up, was Your Excellency.
That's right.
That's
correct.
Okay.
If that's the formal, that's the
Okay.
formal. I call him bishop.
Bishop.
I don't say Your Excellency. I say, hi, Bishop, how are you?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. All right.
I asked Bishop Estevez a few years back the proper way that he would like to be addressed, and he did say bishop.
Bishop.
Just call me bishop.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, there used to be a time when the proper thing to do would be to kiss his ring.
Right.
Notice
Yeah.
someone did that. That's-
There are people who still do it, yeah. They don't, a lot of them don't even like that anymore, you know, kind of can get slobbery, I guess, or something, you know, but,
There's a relic in that ring, isn't there?
no, it's just, no, not in that.
Speaking of the bishop, what's his staff called?
A mitre,
A mitre?
the hat is the mitre, the staff is the crozier.
A crozier. And how, well, I don't remember now how ornate it was and so forth, right?
It's supposed to be a shepherd's crook.
Because some of the other bishops that have shown up here, and we saw one in Valdosta, it's all just a shepherd's hook.
Yeah.
But his is very ornate.
Yeah, that's personality, you know, I mean,
Is it your own personal? How
Yes,
they-
yes.
Okay, it's not passed down, belongs to the diocese or anything?
well, you know, the bishop, he dies and it's left, you know, he doesn't usually take it with him, right? They carry him out and he leaves his crozier behind. But
Buried with them or burned with them?
yeah, no, it doesn't get buried with them. But most bishops choose their own, and it's like if you're choosing anything. You know, if you were to buy something for yourself, your taste and my taste might be very different. I may like something very fancy and expensive. You may just like it simple and to the point. You know, and it's personal. So, like when this guy came in, our diocesan liturgist, Father Tom Willis, he sat down with him and he picked the mitre, has the little diocesan symbol on it. Like, what do you want? You know, what kind of vestments do you want? What kind of this do you want? And he would say, and show him the catalog, I guess, and I'll take this one and that one. So, Bishop Estevez his was like a shepherd's crook. It was a wooden shepherd's crook. Our bishop has a fancy silver one.
What are the different, so if he's a suffragan bishop, right? So does he have like a assistant bishop or?
We're not big enough for that, but he's a suffragan bishop because St. Augustine is a suffragan diocese of Miami.
So the
Archdiocese of Miami.
So what authority, because they're both bishops, so they're both like technically the same rank, right?
They're both equals, yeah.
Right. What authority does Miami have over St. Augustine?
None, really.
Okay.
There are a couple of specific jobs the archbishop has that, you know, like for example, when the bishop dies, it's the archbishop's job to notify Rome that the bishop has died, that kind of stuff. You get these little assignments that...
Would that help? Why do bishops dress this way?
Yeah, play it. But they're all bishops, even the Pope is just a bishop.
Right.
Now he's Bishop of Rome, so that, you know, and practically speaking, they do have some more authority, you know. You're going to be a little nervous when, you know, but technically there's only 3 ranks in the entire church: bishop, priest, and deacon, and they're all, you know, if you're a bishop, you're a bishop. Doesn't matter if you're the Pope or you're the Bishop of Podunk, you know, you're still the bishop, a bishop.
Right. And his deacon is that the guy that was up there?
Yeah, it's all of us, so we all work for the bishop.
Right.
So, you know, I used to have to do those things years back when I was younger. I don't have to do them anymore. But
Keto, which means a little pumpkin. So, why do bishops dress like this? First of all, this is not a yarmulke, and it's called a zucchetto, which means a little pumpkin, because it sort of looks like one. And the color signifies ecclesiastical rank: black for priests, magenta for bishops, and red for cardinals, and of course white for the Pope. Bishops also and always wear a cross, usually on a chain, over the chest, known as the pectoral cross. And the crosses that many people wear around their necks actually are derived from the bishop's pectoral cross. And on the right hand, the bishop wears the episcopal ring given to him at the time of his consecration as a bishop. It symbolizes the spiritual marriage of the bishop to the church and of our fidelity to her even unto death. Next, there is the mitre. Its shape represents the tongues of fire that rested on the head of the apostles, the first bishops of the church. And the two peaks, front and back, represent the Old and the New Testaments, united on the bishop's head, so as to highlight his responsibility to teach the Word of God. Finally, we have the crozier. This staff is carried in procession, or whenever a bishop walks from one place to another during the liturgy. It's reminiscent of a shepherd's crook, and it serves as a reminder that bishops are to be shepherds who truly care for their flock and keep them united in the fold of Christ, the Good Shepherd. Why do bishops dress like this?
The only thing he missed is the shape of that hat, that pointy shape. That's supposed to be a flame. Like
He said that.
he said, a flame.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Like a Pentecost, right?
Yes, that's what he said.
The okay, I missed that thing. I remember once one.
Thank you.
Yeah, this guy. I remember once one priest said that deacons and priests should not wear rings because rings are an episcopal symbol. And I kept quiet because I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid. I know when to keep my mouth shut. But I wanted to say that's absolutely wrong. The reason a bishop wears a ring is because the ring is the nuptial symbol. And as he said, the bishop is married to his diocese. That's why a bishop wears a ring. Right? It's a marriage symbol. Technically, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of once you become bishop of a diocese, you should die in that diocese because you're married. That's your bride, right? That you stay there till death. That's not what happens, of course. If you have any particular talent, you get promoted to a bigger diocese, because you get a bigger wife.
Anytime I see stuff like this on the internet, I like to check with you.
Okay.
Because if some guy was giving bad information, I wouldn't catch it.
No, you would.
No, I wouldn't.
But yeah, and I think that's a nice thing to point out. The bishop's ring is a symbol of marriage, his marriage to the diocese. Sure.
The Pope's ring, they destroy?
Yeah, they destroy. I mean, a lot of that gets ancient. I'm not even sure. The Pope's ring used to have his unique seal. So when the Pope would issue a document, he would use that ring to seal it in the wax. Now today that's meaningless. I mean, you could forge documents, but there was a time when for the papal bull, for example. I mean, choice of words. A papal bull comes from Latin bulla for lead, because they would make the seal in lead, and the Pope's ring would be used to kind of impress the seal. And so once the Pope dies, he can't authorize anything anymore, so they destroyed the ring. But I mean, I think a lot of that is all more symbolic today than practical.
I understand they take the ring off his fingers. I might be wrong about that.
Would make nice collector's items if they could somehow sneak it out, right?
Sneak it out.
I got the Pope's ring. Anybody want to have any opening bids here?
John Paul II would be worth a lot.
That's right. That's right.
But you're not allowed to sell those things.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to sell. You're not allowed to sell relics.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
So, I know they changed. They don't have first class, second class, and third class relics.
They do.
Oh, they
do.
still. So they
yeah.
still are classified like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
eBay refuses to sell that stuff.
Yeah.
When someone tries to sell it on eBay, they'll block it.
eBay established a policy that they will not sell sacred objects of devotion. So they can't sell a relic on eBay.
Right.
So what do people do? You don't sell the relic, you sell the reliquary, the theka in Greek, that holds the relic. And you look at eBay, look up relics on eBay. You'll see, $2,000, the theka, the reliquary is what you're buying here. It happens to have the first class relic of Saint so-and-so in it, but that's not what we're selling you. We're selling you the reliquary.
Right.
See how there's always a way around. There's always a way around.
Most of it's just phony.
Most of it is phony. Okay, if you're going to buy a bone of a saint on eBay, you're probably going to get a chicken bone.
Yeah. Well, I was
A very holy chicken bone.
that St. Carlo, that and I mean, I think that the video game, like being patron saint of video games, is maybe a little irreverent on that part. But you know, Cooper being young, like that's a thing that we've kind of seen. And I was telling him, it's like, you know, Cooper, someplace there's an Xbox controller that's a second class relic. I didn't like that though. He's you know, he's like, yeah, I don't think a patron saint of video games is really for me.
I have a few relics that were given to me as gifts, basically all of them. One of them was from my 4th grade teacher, Sister Mary Honorata. And she knew I had a particular devotion to St. Francis, and I was in, I think, 3rd grade or 4th grade, so I was young. And she visited Rome, and this was before the restrictions got serious, and she was able to get a relic of St. Francis. She was a Franciscan sister. She was able to get a relic of St. Francis, first class, supposedly a piece of his bone. And she brought it back with her, and she saw how much I liked St. Francis, so she gave it to me as a gift. You know, and so I was so excited. I ran to show the priest, Father, look what sister gave me. And very typical man, crass, he said, go tell her you want the papers to prove it, you know. Yeah. And so I went back, sister, Father said you should give me the papers to go with it too. And she goes, oh, I threw those away. I figured I knew what it was. What do I need papers for, you know? So I have that still at home in a very inexpensive reliquary, because what can I afford as a 4th grader, 3rd grader, or whatever, but I always thought to upgrade it, and I said, no, it's been sitting in that thing for what, over 60 years or something. Let it continue to sit in that thing. So.
Now, if you have something that's been blessed by a priest, you're not supposed to sell it, correct?
You're not supposed to, let it subject to desecration, you know. I don't know about not selling it. I think the more important thing there is making sure it's not desecrated in any way.
I'm just following the wife.
Well, we had a visiting priest for a retreat here, and he was also selling rosary beads.
Blessed by the Pope, right?
But he wouldn't bless it until after he bought it.
Okay.
So he didn't have a bunch of blessed.
You see that? So again, he's getting around. It's a little loophole thing, you know. First you pay me, give me the money, then I bless you. You know?
$5 plus 50 for the blessing. He's got to eat.
I mean, the desecration is the big thing. If you sell something if you know it's a holy item that's been blessed, you know, set apart for sacred use. If it's in your possession, hopefully you'll take care of it. If you sell it to somebody now, you don't know what they'll do with it. They could desecrate it, and but if you could, you know, it's not. If you had a solid gold rosary, I know somebody with a solid gold rosary that they had blessed by the Pope. I could see them wanting to pass that on, or you know. But they would hopefully do it to somebody that wouldn't just melt it down and make, you know, golden idol out of it or something. I don't know. Somebody ask another question.
I'm trying to. Okay, I got so after the schism, we were talking about this in European history. After the schism in the 1300s, when like the 3 popes kind of when they got rid of the Avignon papacy, what was the mechanism that the church used? Like, did they do an ecumenical council to like, you know, clarify or I don't know, like how does that work?
Things were very, very messy back then.
Right.
You know, I always find it interesting now. People are appalled, and rightly so, that they're allowing the Chinese government to appoint bishops, you know, independent of Rome. But there was a time when kings would appoint bishops, and Rome would say, you have the prerogative to do that. You know, we don't do that anymore, obviously, or I guess we do again with China or whatever. But a pope has to be elected by an ecumenical council, and of course, then there were 3 people vying for pope. And the way they settled it is they held a council and elected a 4th person and said, no, he's the Pope, you know, right.
So all the consecrations done, so I assume that some of the anti-popes consecrated bishops. So how would they have, and if one of those bishops had died and then gone on to consecrate another bishop, what do you know what mechanism they use to, I mean, I would assume that some of those bishops had to then be, reconsecrated or have that like approved in some way, shape, or form. Do you know what mechanism?
Yeah, it gets very complicated, and I could even give you a modern day example of how complicated it gets that even has me confused. But there's an old Latin saying called ecclesia supplet, and that means the church provides,
right,
in Latin, which means that even if we screw it up royally,
right,
the church provides. Now, how that all worked out with invalidly ordained bishops and so forth, you'd have to look, I think, at individual cases. Right. But a very recent case, I would say maybe just a few short years ago in this country, there was a priest who at some sort of family gathering, they watched his video of his baptism. And so this is enough with time.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
yeah. And he was baptized by a deacon, and the deacon said, "We baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." Well, because he said we and not I, the baptism was not valid.
Right.
So that guy had to be baptized again, the proper form. Then he had to be confirmed. Then he had to be ordained a priest because his ordination wasn't valid. Now, what I don't understand, and I've talked to some people about this, other people who know canon law better than me, and they don't understand either why ecclesia supplet wouldn't apply there.
Right.
Kind of
right.
Retroactive. No, okay, well, we're going to make it right now, sort of thing. But it didn't. It didn't. He had to go jump through all the hoops again and get rebaptized and reconfirmed and reordained.
Well, that priest too, all the baptisms that he's done.
They had to contact all those people.
Yeah. But I think, can an unbaptized person technically in like a time of emergency?
Yes. Yes. As long as you intend to do what the church intends.
Right. Right.
You could be an atheist and to be a valid baptism as long as you say, "I baptize you in the name of the Father." So.
Yeah. So I suppose in that sense, any baptism that he's done would be valid.
Yes, so why do they have to go contact all those people and let them know? But they did.
That's just to be safe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I would have thought that would be a perfect application of ecclesia supplet. Andy, you have any thoughts about that?
I agree 100%. And I don't see why it's
that's
One
odd.
of my pastor friends said, God, we were having lunch and we forgot to say the blessing. And he said, the Lord can bless the food in our stomachs as well as on the plate. And so, I would think that, it could be something that would be retroactively cured. I don't see why it'd have to. What was intended was the correct thing, and there was a deviation. But I don't think that would. The church can simply pronounce that we deem those valid. We deem that valid. We deem these valid, and because the intent was there. And the matter, if appropriate, was used, and so we're going to say they're valid and cure that. They can be cured retroactively. I mean, isn't Mary's whole Immaculate Conception based on prospective sanctification?
That's right.
For the works that Jesus would work, years later in her life. So I don't see why there'd be a problem.
People with a higher pay grade than me said otherwise, and I don't understand why, and I don't know anybody who understands why.
The only reason would be, I think as someone said, is that you don't want anyone poking fun or making an issue of it. And if you remember, was it Pope Leo XIII's Apostolica Curiae, where the issue of the ordinations of Anglican priests came up, and because there was a movement afoot to try to join those communions. And the church was asked to validate all of those ordinations, and Leo said that because of the lack of sacrificing language in the Edwardine Ordinal following Henry VIII's death, there was about 100 years or so where all the priests and all the bishops and everyone who was ordained, they were not properly ordained. They were not priests. They were not. They just were not. And so the church then had to go to I think the old Catholic Church of Utrecht and other places to try to, get themselves back in the apostolic succession, so to speak. The bottom line, as Leo said, doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
And so I think the church would say, well, we have that hanging out there where a lot of people, including a lot of Catholic bishops and priests, were hoping that Leo would say, yeah, sure, come on in. And he didn't. And they said, okay, well, now you really held our feet to the fire there, and you were super strict there, but now you're like, yeah, what's the big deal?
Yeah, so it might be historically conditioned. That's what they call it. It might be historically conditioned.
The reasoning behind it. It may not be strictly canon law or theologically required, but it may have been a prudential judgment that we don't want to open ourselves up to this type of questioning in the temple.
It's a thing going on right now with the SSPX, the Society of Pius X. They're going to consecrate bishops.
They're going through China to do that, aren't they? Yeah.
And Vatican is saying if you do, you're going to be excommunicated. And that's going on right now. And they'll be valid but illicit because the bishops, you need 3 bishops to make a new bishop. And the 3 bishops are validly ordained bishops. So they could validly but illicitly ordain a bishop. And so they say if you try to do that, you're excommunicated. So what's going to happen?
The Communist Party does it. Oh, that's okay.
That's okay. The Chinese could do it, and that's okay.
You have a Christian bishop, 3 Christian bishops in SSPX branch, and they're doing it. Then you have godless, atheistic communists at a Politburo saying, let's pick this next one, let's do this one. That's okay.
Yeah. There's that church in Stark. I forgot the name of the church.
St. Edward?
No. That's there's a Society of Pius V congregation in Stark. They make the Society of Pius X look like liberals, but they don't. They say the chair of Peter is empty. There's sede vacantis. Ever since whatever Pius X or
before John the 23rd.
Yeah, there hasn't been a validly ordained pope. There was Father Jan Legesa was pastor at St. Edward's in Stark, and a parishioner was sick, and he went to anoint the parishioner with the sacrament of anointing of the sick, and as he was leaving, one of these SSPV priests walked in to anoint him, and Father Jan said, oh, I have already anointed him, and they said, you can't, you're not a priest as far as I'm concerned. So that's how they would say nobody ordained is. You see how messy this gets with us people involved? I love I love how you would say that we're probably, if we make it to heaven, God's going to say, look at us and say, you people have made this so complicated,
I think so.
So there's all this bickering going on, of the Society of Pius V. And I don't know how big they could be. That's why they started. Now, there's problems now with the Latin Mass, where it can be said, that's another hot potato going on right now. But they started celebrating the Latin Mass in Stark, the traditional Latin Mass, not the one we do, but the old Mass that many of us grew up with, to try to draw some of those people back, because this is. And this Society of Pius X, which is around, I mean, they're in Jacksonville. The bishop has come out and said you may not fulfill your Sunday obligation at those liturgies. Yet you can go to confession with them and you can get married by them. You talk about confusing.
On the reason why there's the set of Anchors say that the seat of
Peter.
the Holy See is empty. Is because starting with Pope John Paul XXIII, supposedly his oath when he took office omitted the part about committing to die in defense of the faith, which had been a part of the ceremony, part of the ordination or whatever from time immemorial.
Right.
But he did not have that. He omitted that.
Just
so
like,
supposedly,
aren't there people today that said, pick somebody, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, were not validly installed because something, that wasn't a valid election, or this is common, this is human nature to say, okay, nope, you don't count. I don't recognize who you say you are. Yeah, and there's also here in High Springs a convent opening up of the Society of Pius X. They've got their land, they're clearing the land. There's going to be a community of sisters living there. And because there's going to be a community of sisters living there has to be a priest living there to say Mass for them every day and hear confessions. They hear their confessions. And I already know people saying, yippee, I'm going to go there. I mean,
Well, I mean, the authority of the church is, a big part of the...
Yes.
That's a pretty big part of the whole structure, so...
I have said many times, I probably have said to you, obedience shines most brightly when you disagree. I agree. I agree with what you're saying, so I'm going to be obedient to you. What is that? That's worthless. It's when what you look at when we talked about papal infallibility and St. John Henry Newman, right? He disagreed with the charism of papal infallibility. He didn't believe that should be declared as a dogma of the Church, and yet the First Vatican Council did. And once it did, he accepted it in obedience. That's the way to go. Not because you like it or don't like it.
Yeah, I went on a deep dive because one of them's the 1962 missile, and then one of them's like the 53 missile or something like that. So it's, the argument just kind of goes down a rabbit hole.
Has anybody gone to the Latin Mass in Ocala?
Is that, I will say that we were talking about it'd be really beautiful to see a Latin Mass.
It's worth going, and you can. It fulfills. It's a valid Latin Mass. It's a saintly society of Saint Peter, the FSSP, Fellowship of the Society of Saint Peter.
They're the one. They're more in communion.
Absolute, total, perfect communion.
So that's
so you could go to the Latin Mass there if you want to drive. Ocala's not that far. For us it's a 40-minute drive. We go on occasion, and they're priests that have. They're not diocesan priests, or Father Sebastian couldn't say a Latin Mass if he wanted to.
Right.
That order, that's all they do is the Latin Mass. And there's also the Society of Christ the King. And they have special permission. Since that's all they do, they can celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. A priest has to drive up from Sarasota every week to celebrate that Mass. So it's a bit of an effort for them. And it's beautiful.
Mass.
It's a beautiful Mass. Now, I must admit, we go sometimes, but I am not a fan myself of the Latin Mass. I have to laugh. A lot of times we go for a low Mass there, and when we're leaving, I say to Carol, do you feel like you've been to church? And she says, no. And I say, neither do I, because they don't use microphones or anything like that. It's a big church. There's this guy up there doing something. I mean, if you work hard, you can follow. You know what's happening if you know the Mass.
The focus is on the altar. The priest is turned to the altar, not turning out to the people.
Yeah.
And so it's.
But you're a spectator. I feel like a spectator. Unless you go to now, the High Mass is beautiful because they have the beautiful schola singing. But I'm thinking, wait a minute, am I going to a concert or am I going to Mass, The most reverent, beautiful Masses I have ever experienced in my life, and there have been not often always, but very often, is the Mass we celebrate, the so-called Novus Ordo Mass, done right. Done right. It is about as beautiful, because you are part of it. It's not, you're not watching a guy, you see a man up there offering sacrifice. It does look like he's doing that, but I don't feel like I'm part of that sacrifice. And I'm just a passive spectator in what he's doing.
Do you think that's because of the ad orientem? I mean, what do you think is better? Like, the priest facing the altar or facing the people?
I believe personally, I got in trouble for telling the bishop this. I could tell you that story. But I am in favor of ad orientem. Because with proper catechesis, that this is the priest standing in the person of Christ with us behind him, and the priest saying, Father in heaven, these people behind me are with me. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But, people say such stupid things like, I don't want to look at the priest's rear end. Well, you shouldn't be. This is silliness. This is silliness.
Yeah, I've seen some very beautiful Novus Ordo, and it was ad orientem.
This is not this bishop, so let me clarify that. With another bishop in this diocese, there was a listening session with the bishop, and I said, and this is being recorded, I guess. I made the comment that bishop, I think with proper catechesis, ad orientem liturgy would be absolutely beautiful. And it was a listening session, so he didn't say anything. He just sat there with his eyes closed. I understand he went to Father Sebastian and said to him, "What the hell is wrong with this deacon of yours?" And then, that was on a Friday, that listening session. Pastoral briefings came out on Monday back in those days. Now it comes out on Friday. Pastoral briefings said, "Nowhere in this diocese may a Mass be celebrated ad orientem." Erase this from the recording, Bob.
I think
Please.
this is one of the mysteries of the church, that Christ gave dumb human beings the authority to run his church. And I am sure he knew that this was going to cause confusion and chaos. What I don't know is, what was he thinking? You know, how does this work in his plan
Yeah, I know.
for the church? But I'm sure he knew that all this was going to happen.
Carol's line of, "You people have made this so complicated." You know?
Well, you should have gotten him going about bingo, and then he would have.
There was, I once went with him, we went to Ocala, and we were looking for Our Lady of the Springs, of all places. The one, Our Lady of the Springs here. And we couldn't quite find it. We're driving around. This was earlier days of GPS. It was sending us somewhere, and it wasn't quite right. But then we kind of got ourselves on track, and far in the distance, you could see a big sign that says bingo, and the bishop looks at me and says, "I think we found the church."
Well, they were playing bingo when we went to that thing on Saturday, the confession for the kids.
Yeah.
And they were playing, Stephanie had playing bingo, and I joked with them, like, "All right, you guys need to pay attention to this. It's a big part of the thing."
Are they calling the numbers and letters in English or Latin?
Well, they were, yeah.
The bingo people.
Remember, in the early church, like the first 3 centuries, the common language spoken by the people was Greek, right? And so what language was the liturgy in? Greek, But then, after about 400 years, Roman was entrenched a lot better. What language did people speak in the Roman Empire? They spoke Latin. So things were the transition.
no orders for that time.
That's right. And so everybody spoke Latin. There's talk in the church, I don't think it's going to gain any steam, but there's talk about, well, if the point of this is to speak the language of the people, the official language of the church should not be Latin, it should be English. I could imagine the explosions that are going to happen if they actually float that and say, we're going to change everything. Because right now, technically, Latin and French are the 2 diplomatic languages, right? So probably 95% of church documents are written in Latin, and then they get translated into the vernacular of various places. But something like the Catechism, I think the original language of the Catechism was French, because that too is a diplomatic language. And that was the problem with the first edition of the Catechism. They said, people did the translating, they said they don't know French very well because they did a poor job translating it into English. You got to keep that perspective. There's nothing. I once got somebody in the parish angry because they came here into this room several years ago, and they never come. And then they walk in one day, sitting in the back, smiling politely, and they say, "I hope you've told them that when they pray, their prayers are more effective if they pray them in Latin." And I said, "No, I didn't tell them that because that's nonsense." And she got very angry with me and had never come back since. I think you ought to pray in a language you could understand. I think that's important. That's my opinion. I'll tell you when it's my opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion. But I don't think I should pray words that I don't know what those words mean. I remember, this was before I was ordained. I had a friend, both had a friend who was a priest, and he left the priesthood to get married. But I was studying for the diaconate at the time. And we were driving in the car somewhere together, and he said, "Tell me, when you men get together, do you begin with prayer? Do you pray the liturgy of the hours?" I said, "Oh, yeah, of course we do. We pray the prayer of the church." He goes, "Oh, good. You prayed in Latin or English?" And I said, "Well, English." He goes, "Oh, what a shame." And I said, well, when you were in the seminary and priesthood, what language did you pray? And he goes, well, of course we prayed it in Latin. And I said, so you understand Latin then? He goes, no. Hey, you don't understand Latin, but that's what you should pray. Something's not connecting here.
That's pharisaical.
Yeah, the tracks from the East Coast and the West Coast are not meeting together like they should here. Somebody went off somewhere. You pray in a language you understand. Now, Latin could be beautiful, and you could learn Latin, and a lot of the prayers of the Mass that we're praying now during Lent, you know what you're praying. Sanctus, 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 Dominus Deus Sabaoth, Holy, Holy, Holy Lord God of hosts, right? You know that. Kyrie, it's Greek, Kyrie eleison, but you know it as Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. What else? Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccati mundi. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. But you understand, so that's great, that's fine. You could enjoy the Latin, you could enter into the mystery of the Latin prayers because you know what you're praying. Pater Noster, qui es in caeli. So you know, our Father who art in heaven. There's certain prayers we just know.
I was talking to Father Sebastian the other day, and he was talking about that rite that he grew up in and was ordained in the Eastern Rite. And so I got on YouTube and watched a couple of those.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you want to talk about of course it's YouTube, so you're seeing the best example.
Right.
But
Eastern liturgies get very elaborate.
Yeah, but in Aramaic, like this whole liturgy, and the priest at the altar, the whole Mass, he would sing, and then they, have traditional like Indian instruments like that, piano with the thing, and then the congregation would answer, and during the consecration, it's really cool what they do. After he, breaks the host, he'll dip like a corner of it into the
precious blood, yeah.
And then they just very I don't know if they're like dusting off. I've asked Father Sebastian if I get,
We're going to have a Syro-Malabar Mass here in English. There's a priest in, we're trying to set it up. There's a priest in south of here. What's that? A town south of Gainesville. Not Micanopy, no. In our diocese, where the lakes are. Anyway, there's St. William is the church, and the priest there is an Indian priest, and he has agreed to do the Syro-Malabar Mass in English for us. He doesn't have the English books though. He needs to get the English books, but we're get the English books. He said he would come and do it. So we could see that.
Great, yeah.
I remember this again. You can't post this. Because there was another time when a woman wanted her Father Sebastian to baptize her baby. But she said, you could.
No, I'll mark it this way.
All right.